33. June 2006. To have a birthday on a weeknight was awkward. It was a 5 of 7 chance any given year, yet nobody seemed to mention how terribly common and anticlimactic this was. For a milestone birthday, like his son's 18th, to fall on a Wednesday, a school night, seemed wretchedly unfair. The other kids, and truly they were still kids, would be unlikely to go out and celebrate with Lachlan. Too much study to be done in this year, the year of their higher school certificate, and too few with their driver's license to be travelling into town. In a way, Charles had felt sorry for the boy. That was until he'd approached Locrian about any desired celebrations and received such a milquetoast response. RSL is pretty boring on a weeknight. And what would you know about that? Nan took us there a few times. Just trivia and soggy fish and chips. You've got me there, son. We can just celebrate at home then. I'll go out, Leah had added. You can pick me up later. Nice try, girl, Charles replied. You'll get your chance soon enough. His daughter had sulked at what she deemed a missed opportunity, and instead resorted to a reluctant hug and a mumbling of happy birthday to her big brother. So it was that Lachlan simply went to school because it was the thing to do, and quietly accepted the well wishes, prayed for the day to end, prayed for the spotlight of attention to shift away from him. His father wasn't going to let him off that easily, though. This was his boy turned young man, and he wanted nothing more than to make it known just how pleased he was to have him for a son, how much he filled the old man's heart with joy. But it was never quite so forward with teenagers. To show them any level of emotion, they'd merely retreat, mutter their embarrassments, and bemoan how their father would never understand them. He had to make it special. This was a rite of passage. He'd only become an adult once in his life. Why could Lachlan not see the importance of marking such an event? Yet he agreed to a first beer with his dad, an ulterior motive for Charles to impress upon him the perils of alcohol misuse. It was a fine evening for it, the air still pleasant in wake of the approaching night's cool, the sun hanging low in the western winter sky, the stillness of the trees reflecting those fading rays of gold, to the distant melody of kookaburra calls as the two of them sat on the veranda. Cheers, son. Lockie had watched his dad partake of the ritual many times, often with Nan, and to now hold the smooth glass bottle in his hand was an unusual sensation. There did seem to be some sort of appeal to the satisfying sound of glass clinking, the fizz of the elixir within, and the lucid greens and browns of the glass itself. It's fucking gross. Look, mate, just because you're an adult now doesn't mean you speak like that. Sorry. Whatever. Just don't do it in front of me or Nan, okay? He let out a surprised laugh. No worries, Dad. Oh, and Leah, Charles added. That girl doesn't need any more encouragement with profanities. Too late, Dad. No matter, Locke. Nobody actually likes drinking these things, especially the first one. In all honesty, Lockie had never really thought about why adults drank alcohol, beyond it being simply what they did. Just, he said, it burns. I don't like how that feels. He grimaced and rubbed at his throat. That's barely the first of it too, replied Charles. Too much and you'll start saying and doing some pretty silly things. Not me, of course. Saint. His father smirked, before a change fell over his demeanour. You know, goes without saying, we're very proud of the man you've become, Locke. Lachlan, leaning forward, rocked his head about in discomfort. I mean it, mate. Just let me say it, okay? Your mum and I love you dearly. There's no doubt you'll do great things. No doubt? He wondered how his dad could be so certain, watching the old man shuffle awkwardly in his seat, looking about with a sudden nervousness he didn't understand. Charles sorted through the thoughts in his head. This was a moment he'd lived out internally so many times across the years. And now the day of his son's 18th had finally arrived. He was no longer able to build himself up to speak. His voice shook with nerves and drink. You know, son, the day you were born was the happiest day of our lives, your mum and I. Leah's birth too, I should say. And, well, I don't know. Maybe you have questions about Mum that I could answer for you. Lockie stared out into the trees that had presently lost their lustre of sunlight to the dusk. No, not really. The response took Charles aback somewhat. The many rehearsed conversations he'd had in his mind over the years had all slipped away in that moment. You ever want to talk about her not being around? Not physically, I mean. Charles stumbled over his words. I don't really know what I'd do with that information, replied Lockie. A thought emerged for Charles, an old one, an uncomfortable intrusion, that questioned how much his young son had seen on that day, how much he even remembered, having only been a toddler. I don't really know what I'd do with that information. Did that imply that he'd seen nothing at all? It was a hopeful notion, if not forlorn, and Charles prayed that it might be true, that what he should say to his son would become clear. He'd made it transparent over the years that he was an open door for his children. He might now tell an adult Lachlan there and then of the details of that horrible day. But what would that accomplish, whether the boy was aware or not of the specifics? If not distress, what would speaking it aloud accomplish? There was little more he could do. Having probed about, and having his son decline the offer to have any new revelation unveiled. Charles felt frustrated. The conversation hadn't gone as he'd intended. Nothing in life ever did. He had more to write, but his page was already full of words, and the fading daylight made it impossible to see. In that moment, he felt no closer to reconciling his family's sufferance. Perhaps it was a journey he'd never complete, so he'd be better off taking in the sights along the way, concerning himself only with the love he held for his wife and children. Above them, the first star emerged unhurriedly, the wandering star of the evening, finally visible in the indigo sky. She loved you, Charles finally said. I know, Lockie replied. Maybe because he knew, or maybe because he just wanted his dad to shut up. Charles was no longer speaking rehearsed lines, merely allowing the speech to form as it would. You were her bright star in a dark night. He liked to think he momentarily saw the hint of a smile on his son's face, but he could have been wrong. God knew he'd been wrong so many times before.